Israel said, we're going to be setting equations here, not you. And according to our equation, if you fire on us, we are going to be firing directly at you, Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu, because he felt that he owed President Trump, held back, but this was too much. This was a step too far. The message says that Israel is not the 51st state, because this is a slippery slope. You don't respond to this, you're inviting a lot more aggression. That's the rule of thumb in this region. Welcome to this MirYam Institute briefing. I'm Yaakov Lappin, in-house analyst here at the MirYam Institute. It's June 8th. It's 7:15 in the evening here in Israel. It's been a very dramatic 24 hours, and I wanted to walk you through some of the recent developments and to try and hopefully draw some conclusions about what it all means going forward, not just for Israel, but also for the region and for global security as a whole. Recently, what we've had is Iran and Hezbollah. This is what we call the Shiite axis. This is an axis of jihadists, and their goal is to destroy this country because it's a Jewish state, and they reject, really on theological, ideological, fundamentalist reasons. They reject the idea of a Jewish state here in the Middle East, but they're also totally opposed to the idea of moderate Sunni Arab countries. That's why they fire missiles at their Gulf neighbors and terrorize them. And so, for reasons that are probably too long to get into right now, Iran and Hezbollah decided to try their luck, and they decided that they're going to try and bully Israel into accepting what we call equations. These are not mathematical equations. This is basically a formula for trying to dictate to rivals and enemies what happens if they take steps that are undesirable to each side. And so what was happening was that Iran saw that Hezbollah, its main proxy, what it established back in the 80s as a extension of the Islamic Revolution to extort and export this fundamentalist jihadist vision and to turn Lebanon into its fiefdom. That's what Hezbollah was created to do, and to encircle Israel with these terrorist proxies, and Hezbollah was a flagship project here. Iran saw that Hezbollah is really starting to take a major beating. We saw that its leadership was eliminated. We saw that most of its firepower was eliminated. We saw that Israel is now taking over southern Lebanon, establishing a large buffer zone, a security zone. This is the heartland of Hezbollah. This is where it invested most of its resources. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese Shiites, who were the base of Hezbollah, were evacuated by Israel for their own safety, and that means that the human shields of Hezbollah and all of the shadow state, the state within a state that the Iranians and Hezbollah built in Lebanon, all of that being taken apart piece by Israel. And this really disturbed the Iranian leadership, the Ayatollahs and the IRGC, which is the elite military group that runs Iran. And they decided that they're going to try and take advantage of what they consider to be a weak spot in the American-Israeli alliance. That's how they read it. That's how they believed that reality was unfolding, and that they would try and dictate to Israel a new equation. And what they told Israel was, if you, Israel, attack Dahya, which is the southern Beirut district, and it's under the control of Hezbollah. It's a stronghold of Hezbollah because it's a Shiite area. A lot of Hezbollah command centers are there, and this is basically a southern Beirut suburb, very large area as a whole, for compared to the rest of the Lebanese capital. And Iran basically told Israel, if you attack this place, we, Iran, are going to attack you with missiles. Now, why did they say this? Because Israel was basically tearing apart Hezbollah's entire infrastructure in southern Lebanon. And let's remember that the whole idea of on October 7th, the whole idea of invading a border area of Israel, committing massacre, sending jihadist death squads to murder and rape and kidnap, this was Hezbollah's idea. Hamas copied this idea in Gaza and southern Israel, but the original plan was hatched by Hezbollah, and they were planning to do this in northern Israel, in the Galilee region. And all of those capabilities to launch such a devastating attack have already been destroyed. Most of the arsenal has been destroyed. Hezbollah can still try and get a cell across the border. They might try to do that, but they're really a shadow of their former selves. And so Iran, in a sort of desperate move to try and save its proxy, because Hamas Outside of Gaza is basically finished. Inside of Gaza, it's still a threat. That's a subject for another video. But Hezbollah is all it has left, and Hezbollah's on the ropes. So they set this equation for Israel. And what Israel said was, listen, if you, Hezbollah, fire on our northern Israeli communities, rockets, mortars, anti-tank missiles, drones, if you do that, we are going to hit Dahya. And what happened was that Hezbollah fired on the northern communities 2 days ago, and the IDF struck in Dahya. Now, the IDF struck a relatively small Hezbollah headquarters, but this was a direct challenge. And this is very meaningful because Iran until now has basically been getting away with firing on all of its neighbors. It's fired on the Emiratis since the so-called ceasefire went into effect on April 8th. It's fired on Bahrain. It's fired on the Saudis. It's really getting away with murder. And so they were overly confident. They thought that they could pull this extortion racket on Israel too. And they announced after the attack on Dahya that they are going to be attacking Israel. And that's exactly what they did. They fired around 30 ballistic missiles in multiple waves. They got the Houthis, their proxy in Yemen, to fire another 2 missiles. One of those fell on the way to Israel. One was heading into Israeli airspace. Virtually all of the missiles were successfully intercepted. And then here's where it gets interesting. Israel said, we're going to be setting equations here, not you. And according to our equation, if you fire on us, we are going to be firing directly at you, Iran. This is something that no Gulf state is in any position right now to do. They don't feel that they're able to take that step. They don't feel they have the backing, unfortunately, of the Trump administration to take that step at this time. And so we also saw this bizarre spectacle of President Trump tweeting and saying, Israel, don't attack, don't do it. And it's very important, because Israel has been a very important part of the coalition with the United States to attack Iran in February, in March, and the beginning of April. And for its membership in this coalition, it had to accept certain restrictions. This is kind of like a price tag that President Trump extracted from Israel when he said, okay, we joined you in this war, but now you're going to have to conduct yourself in line with our interests, America, even if this clashes with your interests, Israel. And for a while, that's what happened. Prime Minister Netanyahu, because he felt that he owed President Trump, held back. He held back multiple times in multiple scenarios. But this was too much. This was a step too far. Prime Minister Netanyahu knew that if he held back now, this would be devastating for Israeli security, for Israel's strategic stance. For Iran to fire 30 missiles and for Israel not to reply is really a suicidal posture in this jungle in the Middle East where all of our enemies are watching us and also our friends. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli defense establishment, which was firmly behind the idea of responding, decided to send a message. And this message was aimed at everybody. The message says that Israel is not the 51st state, even though it hugely appreciates and needs the alliance with the United States. There's no question about that, but it is still not going to accept the idea that it's going to be dictated to for its critical interests, its national security interests, its existential interests in this case. Because this is a slippery slope. You don't respond to this, you're inviting a lot more aggression. That's the rule of thumb in this region. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu told President Trump, no. The answer is no. We are going to respond. And the response started coming in. And once these dozens of Israeli Air Force fighter jets took off, first of all, they took out a number of Iranian air defense batteries. Most of Iran's air defense system was pretty much destroyed during Operation Roaring Lion, February, March, April, and the Iranians were just starting to reconstitute that, and many of these sites were hit. And then Israel went after a petrochemical site in southwest Iran, and this is a site that actually produces a lot of raw material for Iran's missile program. And then Iran remembered something. It remembered that it's got a lot of strategic sites, critical sites, and it can't defend any of them. They're all completely exposed to Israeli firepower. And in fact, according to reports, there were many more attacks in the pipeline. The Israeli Air Force had prepared itself for this day. And this is when President Trump really sent a firm request to Prime Minister Netanyahu to hold back. And the Iranians said that they would hold back. And this is where the situation that we find ourselves in today meets us. The Iranians have ceased their attacks on Israel. Israel, because of the US's request, has ceased its attacks for now on Iran. And then, things got really interesting because you had Iranian generals and officials saying, okay, we've forced our equation on Israel. There'll be no more attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon. And literally within an hour of that statement, Israel conducted several strikes on southern Lebanon. I should say on Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon, because that's what's being hit here, and basically laid to waste any claim of an Iranian equation that was enforced on Israel. And so this is a very important 24 hours because Israel reestablished its independence, even though it's in a close and critical alliance with the United States, militarily, politically, strategically, economically. It today reestablished its independence, that it's going to pursue its independent security interests, even if that means telling a very close friend of Israel, President Trump, no. Now, there are all kinds of theories out there. Maybe President Trump was happy to play the good cop to Israel's bad cop. I personally don't think that that's the case, but you've got theories like that going around. I'm not going to get too much into that. I think it is convenient for President Trump to portray Israel as some sort of Rottweiler on a leash that has to be held back. I think that's convenient for him because he's trying to push the Iranians into a deal. And this is a stick. Israel becomes a stick that he can use to do that. And I don't think Israel minds that too much either. But I think that it wasn't really about that today. I think that there was a genuine attempt by President Trump to avoid this entire situation. And I think it's really absolutely critical, the decision that Israel took today to take matters into its own hands and to signal and broadcast to everybody, friends, foes, allies, neutral parties, everybody, especially in this region, that Israel is going to take action when its security interests call for it. And it is going to set equations. It's not going to be dictated to. Now, this is not absolute. There is no such thing as absolute application of principles in this complicated world that we live in. But this is the direction that events have taken us towards. And I think it's very important that this happens.